dialogue. And I'll just give you a quick example. You know, the Army was talking about the stress they're under, and I told the Secretary, I said, you have 40% of your National Guard today that hasn't deployed. If we can find the money, they're ready to go. And you don't need the highest state of readiness to do many of these presence missions we're doing. And it kind of caught some eyes around the table. The Air Force said, hey, we're already doing that, and you can see they're doing it. General O leaned over to, General Odierno leaned over to General Welch and said, how you doing it? He says, I directed my staff to put money in the right pot so we could use our reserve component so we don't break our active. The Commandant of the Marine Corps, sitting right across the table from me, he looks over to Secretary of Defense, and he says, Mr. Secretary, if I could find the money, I would use my reserve more too. That's the kind of stress our active brothers and sisters are under. But again, without being a member of the JCS, I would have never heard that conversation. I would have never had to be able to have that conversation. About a month ago, the President comes over. Every so often, we either go meet with him or he'll come to the Pentagon. He spent an hour and 50 minutes with us talking about ISIL and ISIS. He says, we got to defeat ISIL and ISIS. But I'm not going to put men and women of our uniformed services in harm's way unless you can tell me the strategic effect that it's going to have. If you have an operation underway, you're going to take down a target, you better come in and tell me the strategic effect for the long term. We can't look at this as a short term. Again, the Guard would have never been in that conversation. When it comes to the non-federal, I am there all the time. I pick up the phone, I call the chairman. You name the disaster that's about to occur somewhere, or Ferguson, Baltimore, those issues, the bombings in Boston. I would get a call immediately from the Adjutant General. I'd pick up the phone or go in and see the chairman and said, hey, we need to let the SecDef know, here's what the governor's thinking. You're going to see some troops in the streets, here's the status they're going to be in. And Chairman Dempsey always appreciated that. Again, none of that kind of dialogue would happen. Now, the other thing, though, that you got to realize is that when you are a member of the JCS and behind closed doors with 7 of you, when you make a recommendation to the Secretary of Defense, you don't want one of us coming out of there going a different direction and saying, well, I really didn't agree with all the rest of them. That wouldn't be bad. That wouldn't be good for the nation. So that's been kind of the balancing act I've had to play sometimes because I am a full voting member. So when we talked about what was happening in Syria, it started out kind of with, what are we going to do about the chemical weapons? I was a voting member. When we allocate forces around the world, I told the chairman one day, he says, so Frank, what's your vote on allocation of fast attack submarines to COCOMs? I told him it was a little dangerous to ask a combat engineer that question, but he said, well, it's a little dangerous to ask an infantryman that question. But your staff has to get up to that level because you now are serving as a full member. So I think I tell you all that just because we have a voice that is incredible now because of you, because of many of our men and women that wasn't there before. And if I say now after 3 years looking at it, what's the value? First of all, the value is being able to tell the very senior leadership of the United States of America when Guardsmen are moving on the streets of America and what they're doing and what they might need. What do they need for the future? We can do that. In deployment situations, we cannot let the National Guard go back to a strategic reserve. I've lived it. The nation cannot afford that. The world can't afford that. We lead the world in so many areas. So we've stressed, we are not going back to a strategic reserve. It's just not going to happen. Now let's figure it out. Let's figure out how we're going to make this work. And again, we can have that dialogue and that discussion that before the chief was on that, it would be 3 or 4 levels to even get to the secretary.
So to General Grass's point, so he talks about the strategic level. So what about the enlisted perspective? Because we now sit at that level, we get an opportunity to get invited to venues we haven't in the past. And one of those is Secretary of Defense Dan Hagel had a junior enlisted luncheon that he would have once a month. And because we're a National Guard Bureau, we got an invitation. And so we would bring E4s and E5s into the National Capital Region, prep them up to go and talk to the Secretary of Defense. We grabbed a guy out of DC's, he was a specialist, last name is Severo, and he showed up that day. And I got to tell you, his recruiting poster, it was beautiful, beautiful. Spit polished and shiny, he was ready to roll. Brief them up on all the issues. Don't say this, do say that. If you ask a question, answer it the best of your ability, but it's okay to say I don't know. So that afternoon, he's standing on the wall, and the old dude walks inside the room, and he hears somebody say, who's the old dude? He says, now's my chance. So the specialist walks over and he shakes his hand. Mr. Secretary, it's nice to meet you. My name is Specialist A. Severo. The Secretary of Defense looks at him and goes, well, Specialist, how long you been in the Army? And he says, no. I'm in the Army National Guard. That's right. He just called him out. So the SecDef says, well, I'm not going to be any fool, right? So we're having problems with sexual assault in our military. What are you doing about it? I belong to the Junior Enlisted Council, and this is what we're doing at our unit. The next day, we get a memo. It comes out to our office mandating junior enlisted councils for everybody in the National Guard. Tell me that E4 didn't make a difference because we got invited and we're sitting at that level. That's who we are.
We'll go to the next slide. Just a quick snapshot of what your National Guard is today. Army Guard, the end of this fiscal year, we'll finish out the year, it should be around 350,200. Some great work going on out there in the States. We had to turn the tide a bit on our recruiting on the Army, but we're going to probably end the year right at about 350,000. Beyond that, still waiting for the 16 budget to tell us where we're headed. The Air Guard, 105,000. Depending on what happens in the 16 budget, that could grow by another 500 or 1,000 in the next year or two. So we're watching to see what comes out of the 16 NDAA. You can see the size of our units, our 8 divisions. And in the 28 combat brigades, we may be going to 26. We're still working through that. And the states that are losing those know who they are. And it's just the brigade headquarters, and we'll probably replace them with something. But that's still under debate. You can see our 89 wings. Some of those wings have switched over from flying wings to combat UAS wings, RPA wings. They're flying missions, and not too far from here, right now, a mission's being flown. Our men and women, because of our hometown America, living in the same place, reporting into work every day, are creating tremendous expertise in intelligence over the battlefield and remotely piloted aircraft. And they are taking some very strategic shots out there from hometown America because of the technology. And I think what we're seeing right now, and General Welsh just talked to me about it, it's very difficult right now on active duty to keep RPA pilots. They're using them very heavy. But in the Guard, because they do get to go and see their family at night, or the next day, whenever if they're on a night shift, we are able to sustain that. So we've asked General Welch, what can we do to help you with RPA pilots and intel analysts? So it's an area that's growing for the Air National Guard. Our fighter wings, and I can show you in a minute here just where they're at all over the world. Our A-10 units, Chief and I just visited Indiana. Well, actually, Indiana A-10s had just left Kuwait, and we bumped into Michigan's A-10s, 107th Squadron, doing fantastic work. 116, 120 degree temperatures, flying over Iraq and Syria in the personnel recovery mission and dropping bombs and shooting bullets on bad guys. Just a tremendous asset on the battlefield. We have F-16s in the Pacific right now on missions, training missions and reassurance missions in Europe. We have 12 jets that are flying continuous right now. F-15s that came out of Jacksonville, Florida, 6 of them, and the other 6 came out of Portland, Oregon. They teamed up together. They're doing, I think it's a 90-day rotation. So Jacksonville fell on the jets for 90. They rotated out. Portland's on the jets now. General Breedlove, he actually hosted us at his house. He likes the Guard so much, so just come over to my house and you can stay here in Mons, Belgium with us before you head down south. And the Air Guard is just into everything. The numbers are growing right now on the mobilizations. We don't want to break it, so it'll be very interesting and see what your thoughts are, and I ask that all the time. We don't want to break the system. If I ask, as I travel around, I always ask, are we stressing the force anywhere? And the one area that's coming out now a little bit is our refuelers, our tanker units, because they are turning very quickly. So I'll go back and talk to General Clark a little bit, see what we can do to relieve some of that stress. But the rest of the force says no. 40% of the Army Guard hasn't deployed. They want to go. The young men and women joining, they tell us all the time. I said, tell me, are we using you too much? Chief asked the same question. He said, no, we joined. We expect to go. Go to the next slide.
Hey, sir, can I ask a question real quick? So one of the things that not specifically mentioned on the slide here is buzzword inside the Capitol Hill is cyber. Can you kind of give me your vision where you think cyber and the Army and Air National Guard are going to go in the future?
Okay. Part of what I mentioned with the Air Guard, 105,000 going to maybe another 5,000 or 10,000, another 500 to 1,000. Part of that will go into cyber if we get it. And we have 12 Air National Guard units today in cyber. They're transitioning, some cases, from network warfare squadrons over to cyber ops squadrons. We've got an aggressor squadron. But those 12 are positioned around the states. And we have 4 more that the Air Force has asked us to stand up, 4 more cyber ops squadrons. But we need that manpower space so that we can position it out in the states. The Army Guard, we have 1 cyber protection team stood up. It's been stood up now for about a year, trained. It was brought on full-time, 39-person cyber protection team. They're working for our cyber, Army Cyber Command. They've got their own patch. In fact, the commander, you'll see him in the video here, we'll show it in a minute. He was the guy there when they stood that unit up and patched them. We tried to draw them from across the nation. So when they finish their active duty tour, we push them back out to the states. Now we're seeding the states with some Army cyber warriors. And then we got the great civilian experience out there that we can draw into our cyber units. We actually have announced 3 more Army Guard traditional cyber units, cyber protection teams, 39-person teams. And we've got another 7 that General Cadavy should be announcing here within the next 6-8 months. See how it goes. When I told the staff, I said I want the Army and Air to talk before we position any cyber units in states. Because what I don't want to do is wake up one day and see all of the cyber units piled in Army and Air, piled into 1 or 2 locations around the country. And we stood up a cyber general officer steering committee, made up of a number of tags and some of the cyber staff that we have, the J3 staff. And the first thing I told them was, okay, let's try to get a cyber capability in every FEMA region for the National Guard. We made that happen. We're on a path to do that. So, okay, then the next step is let's try to get one in every state that has the demographics, the employment, the skills that can not only grow those units, but also can grow beyond that unit, the leadership that can continue to stay into the Guard. So we have E9s and 06s at some point that had grew up in the cyber world, and that's the future of where we're headed. So I think right now in about 2 to 3 years, some of these will be IOC here very shortly, but we should be hitting about 30 cyber units in the National Guard across the country. Now we've authorized every state to have 8 temporary positions, and the states have been managing those internally just to kind of seed across the nation some cyber warriors.
Thanks, sir. Next slide.
So you saw the numbers of what we are. This is what we do. 750,000 guardsmen, over 750,000 of guardsmen have mobilized. We actually bottomed out this year on our mobilization numbers, and we're actually starting the other direction now, partly because of the Air Guard, but also the Army. We're back into the Sinai for a rotation. Chief and I just had a chance to visit. First of the 112th is Texas here. First of the 112th CAV,
Texas.
Army Guard. Major Simons, got a major commanding that, doing great work, 550 warriors there. A couple other states supporting them. But that, you see the number on here. We bottomed out at about 10,000 Army and Air Guardsmen. We're up to about 12,000 right now mobilized. Any given day, 10 to 11,000 of those are actually deployed overseas. What I always like to say though, if you total up everything going on around the map that supports the warfight, or supports theater security cooperation, that includes annual trainings, extended active duty tours, you name it. The number today is about 21,000 guardsmen, Army and Air, somewhere around the map doing a mission for somebody. And to me, and I've told Chief that, it hit me on my last trip that I was always asking myself, what does an operational guard look like? This is, I think I've seen it. I think this is the baseline. I think, 20,000 we could do forever in a force of 455,000 if we do it right. If the men and women know when they're going to go. And we got enough time for predictability, for families to get ready, for our employers to get ready. In some cases, men and women that have already gone 2, 3, 4, 5 times may not be, eager to go right away. They will if we order them or if we tell them we need them, they'll go. But there's others that want to go. It may be in another unit. If you get enough time, you can build them. I saw this happen before the war started in the Balkans. In SFOR, you had people lining up for those deployments that wanted to get. If somebody said, hey, I can't make it, I got an emergency or whatever, there was 2 or 3 more people ready to take that chair. So there'll be some skill sets that are high demand, low density that we'll have to keep our eyes on, but we can easily do 10 to 20,000 mobilized. Now, what I'd really like to do is get that length of that down probably to about a 6-month deployment. I think the services would as well, because we're turning some of our active brothers and sisters way too fast, and it's going to hurt them. And so we got to help them. We can get in there and do some rotations. I think the other thing, though, the chief and I saw is an operational guard isn't all about deployments. It's about exciting training, you know. Was it 2nd or the 34th? It was just down at JRTC. I guess they're there now. 116th Brigade is going to be at NTC here in about a week. Actually, they're arriving now. Those are operational training opportunities that our men and women want to go do. And so we got to keep those going. The external CTC rotations, we got to keep those going. We got a chance to see a Puerto Rico company attached to the world-class OPFOR in Nuremberg, just outside of Nuremberg, and you know, that whole complex of Grafenwehr. There's a lot of opportunities for the Guard to train there. We even got to see the engineers there out of Michigan, and they actually had a squad attached to them of Latvian engineers, and they were all training together. So I think there's a lot of opportunity like that that we can tap on. And some of that's going to be paid for out of new pots of money. I really do think we're going to see by 16, if we can get a budget, I can talk about that a little bit more. If we can get a budget, we will, just like the Air's doing right now with the Air Guard, the Air Force is putting money into pots so that they can reach in and get the pay and allowance and the operations and maintenance to do the European Reassurance Initiative missions. And there's money in that. It's over $1 billion. So the Air Force is pushing money to the Guard out of that. In 2016, the Army already is talking about pushing about 16 million of that to the Army National Guard. We're trying to look out. Will we do like a 30-day rotation, or will we do a 3-week AT? Again, those are the things that will keep your Guard operational.
One of the other key pieces that keeps us operational is our state partnership program. And so if you get an opportunity to take a look at the logo that we've got, this is what the National Guard is. You got the war fight, we're the primary combat reserve. We exist in the homeland, that's where our Minuteman is based out of, but the partnerships. And it's not just inside of our communities, it's because, you know, in our ranks we have police officers and firemen, we got doctors and lawyers that serve within our communities that establish those good partnerships. But when you talk about the state partnership program, what an amazing bang for the buck. We just got an opportunity to go to Djibouti as Kentucky formally announced their partnership with Djibouti. We also just recently announced that Massachusetts.
Here? I didn't hear anything.
Where's Kentucky at? Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, they're split everywhere. And then we just recently announced that Kenya and Massachusetts will be pairing up for our 70th state partnership program. What a great program, a great way for us to not only conduct good immersion training on both sides of the fence, but we take a look at the partnerships. They're actually creating trilateral partnerships now. That's where the partner nations are pairing up together, so the three of us come together. It's pretty amazing.
You know, I talked about warfighting a minute ago. Chief went into partnerships. Our partnerships have become a very strategic tool for the United States of America. Did you know the last 2 partners were somewhat directed by the White House? And we were told not to release Kenya until the president arrived there, which we didn't.
So he could take credit for it.
Well, I'm really happy to see the president of the United States is working for us in this partnership program. And he's using it as a tool it was originally designed for. And, you know, Djibouti just happens to be a priority. I mean, they've been good to us for 13 years. Sure. Went from 88 acres up to 600 acres now, that the camp there. And it's a critical part of the world, and it's incredibly strategic port. And so the president wanted to offer Djibouti a few options, and there were about 5 things he was considering, his staff was considering, and one of them was the partnership with Kentucky. Now, he didn't pick the state, we got to pick the state. The next thing came in was he wants a partnership with Kenya. And we had a lot of states that wanted that partner, and some outstanding packets. But that drives us to 76 state partner programs now. Now what we got to do is get the money right. I'm going in next Tuesday, or Wednesday I think it is, to meet with the Deputy Secretary of Defense to make a pitch for more money into the state partnership program. And I'm going to show how Congress has considered this program very important, because each year they put money in there. But it's hard to manage a program when there are congressional ads all year. We need it in our base budget. Sir. and we're going to pitch that next week to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. Let me drop down to Homeland. California, Washington, Oregon, are you all here? Yeah, amazing work going on right now. The other day you had about 1,000 California Guardsmen. Nevada is a part of that. The fires out west. Any given day, 15 to 20 helicopters, both command and control, medevac, and a lot of them dropping water on fires. Right. Puerto Rico, we were just there. They were fighting fires, probably the first time in a long time. The men and women of the Guard step up to the challenge every time, and this is all handled internal to the states. 1,000 men and women just came to work to help their communities, to help their first responders in the fires. I saw the same thing happen last year. 1,000 guardsmen from Mississippi all the way up to Maine during the snowstorms and ice storms. And it was fascinating because I watched the numbers and I see the information coming in from the tags. And EMACs are kicking in and they're helping each other. And I said, this is really neat because we don't do anything. We just watch it. We try to deconflict if there's a Title X conflict of some type, if there's somebody on an order that a tag needs, but we don't get involved. I just get a chance to report it to NORTHCOM, report it to the Secretary of Defense. And it happens so well that we've gotten very good now at most of the regional. I would tell you that if Katrina happened today, the organization, I've been down to Louisiana, been down to Mississippi, I've seen the organization they have set to respond to a Cat 4, Cat 5 hurricane. And it is incredible, the pre-positioning, the planning, the fact that in each parish somebody's already identified that's going to go there. In each county, some areas, people are already identified. We've gotten very good at that. What concerns me probably in the homeland more than anything, though, is the no-notice, large-scale disaster that affects tens of thousands of people. How are we going to respond when it takes every man, woman, and child, support from the homeland, taking care of themselves, and then the first responders coming in, with tens of thousands of people maybe even buried in some cases of rubble piles? How are we going to get there quick enough? How are we going to organize the command and control? Will FEMA be quick enough? Craig Fugate and I, we just got together a couple weeks ago and talked about this. So now we're focused on the high-end scale. I can tell you there's integrated planning that is very important to Secretary Carter. When he was the Deputy Secretary, I briefed him on the work we were doing. He goes, I want you to keep pushing on that. I want to see the end product. I want to know where states run out of gas, and I've got to have federal assets to support them. And then I want to know how you're going to execute the C2. The C2, I think we're in pretty decent shape with the dual status command. And every state's got dual status commanders now that can command both Title 32 and Title 10. So again, we're spending a lot of time on that piece of our homeland mission on the large end scale. I always tell folks, think about Hurricane Sandy if that was a Cat 5 hitting New York City. Even if you got everybody out of the way, you've got 10, 20 million people that you've just destroyed their infrastructure for a while. Where do they go? Where do they eat? Where do they, what doctors, what hospitals? So there's a lot of work to do there. Go to the next slide. Got a little video. This could be any state, any unit in the Air or Army National Guard today. I am convinced, and I've been to 47 states now to visit troops training. But it's put on.
We have learned over 13 years of war is that in a war zone, our components don't matter. It's competence that matters. It's effectiveness. It's what you bring to the table that matters. Do things take advantage of each other's strengths while not losing some of the things that make the components special. One of the special things of the Guard is how they are part of the fabric of the community.
The Cyber Protection Team standing in front of you represents another first, the first Army National Guard Active Cyber Protection Team.
relationship that's built on mutual trust. It's been built also under fire. We've worked together very, very well. And I think the strength of that relationship, as John Howard said, it's no longer a partnership of friends, but really the sense that we are one family.
This is an amazing honor. Honestly, I couldn't be more proud to be a part of the New Jersey Air National Guard. I'm receiving this award on behalf of all our EAD brothers and sisters that we have lost, and for their families.
About that when we built it was you have General McDew, AMC commander, soon to be Transcom commander, if he hasn't already in the chair, telling the story of the National Guard. You have General Cardone, our cyber, talking about the Guard, you know, in our homeland mission in cyber. And then you have Prince Faisal of Jordan talking about the great value of partnerships in both friendship and family. And so to have others tell your story, we just couldn't pass that up. So, but again, that's your Guard today. Go to the next slide. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because I want to get to some questions. These are strategic direction priorities that I've given the staff 3 years ago. We checked and met about a year ago, said, are they still good? I think they are. And I'd be interested in your thoughts. But, you know, providing the trained and operational forces to the Army and Air Force. We have to be extremely, extremely tight with the Army and Air Force and provide forces to them. They need our help right now, and we want to train together, and we are training together every day. Being good stewards of the resources. I could talk all day on some things there that we really are tightening up right now. And then sustaining the Guard community. And to me, the Guard community is the families, it's the employers, it's our men and women, it's the communities they come from. And what are the programs we need to keep going that maybe grew out of the war effort, but now we got to keep them, we got to sustain them. Family programs, you know, suicide prevention, you name it, child programs, employment programs, you could go on. And then forging and maintaining partnerships, not just state partnerships, but partnerships that Lou Cabrera sitting back here puts together, you know, and works with us very closely on our Youth Challenge. Partnerships in your community, partnerships with Starbase, all of those things. We got to keep those going because it does really give you a signature of who the Guard is when you go into a community. Go to the next slide. I'm going to skip over this because I really want to get to some questions, but I'll just tell you quickly, we've been toying with this for a while now on the realities of change and looking to the future. And what are the global, you can see them on here, what are the global realities that we have to deal with? What does the Guard have to be shaped for the future to get after these types of issues, both homeland and overseas, 10 to 20 years from now? I'm always asking the staff, what are we going to look like 10 to 20 years from now? Because we've got to start that now. We've got to start growing leaders in a resource-constrained environment, which I'm convinced we're going to be in for a number of years. And then with the reality of change, you can see on the lower right there, what is going on within our whole construct of our nation and our mindset of our people and the world, the realities of change, the quick change of information, the fact that they expect us to be there in a moment's notice. Go to the next slide. So this is the one I wanted to leave you with, because I use this on Capitol Hill, I've used it with other groups, and I'm really trying to get some energy behind it. But if sequestration continues on, and right now it is the law, if you look at, go back to 1955, the National Guard, Army and Air combined, was 419,000. Okay, spin that forward under full sequestration, the Army and Air National Guard will be 420,000. The population of the United States in 1950 was about 120 million. The projected population in 2019 is going to be about 330 million. So we have doubled the population, and we're taking the Guard back to where it was in 1955. Oh, by the way, the Army and the Air Force need us faster today. I mean, many of you remember joining. I joined, you know. Asked my my sergeant, hey, how long will I have to get ready? This was in the 70s. He says, oh, you'll have a year to get ready to mob. And we got units now that are going out in 72 hours. They are going to need us faster, whether it's at home or overseas. That's why I say we can't let the Guard get broke in this fiscal cycle we're in.
You know, it's great that General Grass gets an opportunity to kind of give you that good 50,000-foot perspective, all the strategic things that are going on. We, as an enterprise, need to understand our organization, because I'm going to ask each and every one of you to make sure you go out and tell that story. Our communities have to understand this is about as plain as it gets right here. There's a higher expectation of us as guardsmen in our communities. They want to be able to pick up the phone and get us there quick. And most of the times, we're actually there before the governor even calls us. But the governor's got that bat phone. He picks it up. I want my guard, and I want my guard now. And we come running. But it's going to be more and more difficult with that kind of a ratio and with decreasing budgets. So we all talk about politics, right? It's all Capitol Hill. Those guys are making the decisions. But you've heard this over and over again. All politics are local. We have to come at it from our states.
Okay, I will close with one thought, and it deals kind of with this slide. The nation's got some fiscal challenges, no doubt. And when we meet with the president, he talks about infrastructure issues he's got to deal with, social programs, education that need investment. The national debt last year, the interest on the national debt was $250 billion. The whole base budget of defense was about $500 billion. So $250 billion goes out of our coffers, our federal coffers that you all pay into, and nothing in return. Projections, and of course the economy is doing pretty good right now, but some of the projections, 6 to 8 years, would say that that interest on our national debt, if we don't do something, will be about $500 billion to maybe even as high as $750 million in the next 6 to 8 years. Some of the projections. So we really think the Guard is part of the solution right now. Keeping the Guard strong as a wedge, as a security apparatus for the nation, but also available to the governors. And what you pay for us is a small amount, but we got to stay extremely close to the Army and Air Force. We got to look like the Army and Air Force. They provide us our acquisition, the research and development. We don't do doctrine development. We do some on the homeland, but we rely on the Army and Air Force so much. So they've got to be strong too. So I think there's a point in here where we as Americans don't want defense to drop below. But how are we going to deal with that national debt? And I think the Guard will fill in part of that solution. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. So we got a little bit of time for some questions or comments or advice.
So the boss is always looking for advice. So the best part of our jobs is not necessarily we get to work in the Pentagon, but when we get away from the Pentagon. So an opportunity for us to get out and engage and to find out what's going on in the field and see what's on your minds and your guys' perspectives on things that we should be doing for you and things that we should be doing better. So Command Sergeant Major Connolly had his best warriors in D.C. last week, and then Chief Hotelling had brought his Outstanding Airman of the Year. And General Grass had the opportunity to be able to host them at the Guard House, because it's our house. And interestingly enough, the last thing he did is, hey, we're always looking for advice, any questions, what's on your mind? And we had a young individual looked at the boss and he said, sir,